Welcome back to the show. We're going to be talking about waking up your body to infinite intuitive business wisdom with Natalie Baack. And in the show, we'll look at how she woke up her body to her own infinite wisdom and why body image healing is key to tapping into your intuition in your business. And also how you may be blocking your body intuition. Perhaps you're using numbing or avoiding or fear of feeling. Hope no one listening has those, but chances are you probably do. And we'll also look at how you should flow instead of fighting your monthly cycles. So welcome, Natalie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So how did your body wake you up to your infinite wisdom?
Yeah.
I think there's a story there, right?
There is a story there. Yeah. So it's quite a timely story, in fact, if you think about what's in the news right now. So I was in the film industry for 12 years.
Oh my God. You didn't know Harvey Weinstein, did you?
I knew of him quite well. I
Oh.
worked with a lot of his people in his studio, and I had a former coworker who used to work for him, and we would talk often about how horrible our bosses were. You know, essentially, I was in market research in the film industry, doing post-production test reading analysis, and it's been compared to life coaching for movies. Is essentially what I did. I helped them figure out what was in the film's way of reaching its full potential based on audience response, and analyzing that. And I loved doing it, but I didn't love the long hours and the stress and the mindset of I called it a culture of martyrdom, as expected martyrdom. If you weren't working yourself with, to the bone with everything that you had, then, you weren't giving enough. And I had a boss who we would say sometimes, well, at least he's not as bad as Harvey, right? He was a bit of a slave driver. He was subtle, more subtle, but he was frankly emotionally manipulative, and definitely just used us we treated employees as resources more than people, even though he feigned the atmosphere of care, right? So, and simultaneously, since I was about 12, I was dieting, and I was constantly trying to turn my body into that perfect image that I would see in magazines, or that, the weight loss charts and BMI charts would tell us we were supposed to be, instead of just learning how to roll with our own unique body, right? And so I spent about 10 years, 15 years, really focused so much on weight and looks as a measure of health that I didn't listen to what else was going on. And while this was happening parallel to this in the film industry, I was spending, I was working 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours, and under high levels of stress, and, taking responsibility for that. I didn't have good boundaries. I started when I was very young. I didn't have a voice. And whenever I would try and speak up, of course, I would get shut down or poo-pooed or patted on the head and said, who are you to complain? This is a great job, And so at the end of the day, my body just started crashing. No matter what I did dieting wise, I kept gaining weight. My PMDD went out of control, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, to the point where I felt like I was going crazy once a month. My immune system was all over the place. I was getting sick constantly. And of course, simultaneously, I was doing a lot of, partying outside of work to try and make my life feel better. So work hard, play hard is a common phrase in the industry. And so one day around leading up, actually the end of 2012, my body just started giving up on me. I had a nonstop cold for about 6 months. I thought I was going to have to give my cats away because I thought it was allergies.
You were allergic. You were allergic to your boss.
I was allergic to my boss. Exactly. Yeah. Now, at that point, I even had a different boss. Our company had gone through a bunch of different iterations, but the culture is still there. And this is something that I've really, I won't go off too much on this tangent, but with all of this Harvey Weinstein stuff, I think it's important to be having the conversation in the working world beyond just sexual harassment and sexual abuse. There's bullying and emotional abuse that happens, and emotional manipulation that happens, that it makes people feel really stuck in that world, And
I'm wondering if the two are really the same thing on a different, on a spectrum,
where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think a lot of the sexual abuse is a power trip, they just want to bully people into doing what they want. It isn't really about the sex per se.
Oh, exactly. And I think beyond not just Hollywood, but the corporate world, the bullying of women, especially, I have a former CEO who has an organization that empowers women, and she talks about the messy middle and how women tend to get stuck in middle management because of that culture, the patriarchal, misogynistic kind of undertones, not so much undertones, but overtones that run in our corporate world. So essentially, I realized that, whatever it was that I was doing for my health wasn't working. And the phrasing that I used at the time was, I'm not healthy. I had a really bad breakup on New Year's Eve 2013 with a guy who was lovely, but also an alcoholic. And I decided that, I wasn't healthy. And so I had to get healthy to attract healthy. Now, at the time, that also meant that thin equaled healthy. And so I still was stuck in some body image challenges, which I know we'll get to a bit later. But one thing led to another. And the main question I asked myself was, why do I have such a hard time taking care of myself? Why do I have such a hard time sticking to a diet and eating the way that I think that I should? And one thing led me to another. I tried paleo. I tried some holistic health practices. And eventually I found eating psychology coaching. And in that certification, developed by Marc David and Emily Rosen, Marc David primarily, Emily Rosen helped him really bring this work into the world. What we look at in eating psychology is the how and the why of eating and our relationship with food and body and digestion and immunity and all of those things, rather than the what. Although I still, explore the what with people in terms of like what we should be eating to support our own unique body types. But what I really learned in the eating psychology world is our body's trying to get our attention, and it will just get louder and louder until we listen.
It will.
It will. So,
start off with a little ache or pain, and then it will progress into a 6-month cold and
and even
other health issues.
Even the desire to diet, is a symptom. The disconnection from love from our physical body is a symptom of something. So that's essentially how I ended up on the path that I am, of really supporting women in particular, but not close to working with men, but primarily women.
Fair number of men have eating disorders.
Well, and I should clarify, it's not. I don't. There's disordered eating, and then there's eating disorders, and eating disorders is really when it's become clinical, to the point where it's risking somebody's life, right? More immediacy, right? Where a disordered eating is to me based in food wounding. It's made our relationship, our cultural, the way we approach food and body as a culture is wounding. It's telling us that that we're doing something wrong, and there's something wrong with our bodies. There's something wrong with how we eat. As emotional eaters, as overeaters, as as eaters, period. And I think that, the other 98% of us who don't actually have a clinical eating disorder, or who have overcome one, still have really problematic relationships with food that could have a lot more, be based in a lot more self-love and freedom than they are. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you're choosing to put in your body, why not love yourself doing it,
And love the thing that you're putting in it.
And love the thing you're putting in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you feel guilty or bad about it, it's just it's gonna be worse than anything that's actually in the food.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, you can talk about that from a physiological perspective too. If you're looking at food as the enemy, it creates a stress response, right?
Yes.
So when somebody says, if I just look at that cupcake, I'm going to gain 10 pounds. If you're coming in with that perspective, it could actually very well be the case, right?
Yes. Whereas if you come in from it, well, I'm giving myself, I love this cupcake and I love myself eating it.
And I'm savoring it, and I'm going to honor myself for doing it. Yeah.
I'm enjoying it, and I'm noticing how I feel as I eat it too. That's the other thing I do. I'll eat different foods, but I do notice some foods I feel different as I eat them or after I eat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the case of the cupcake, I'll quite often get a rush from the sugar.
Yeah.
And then I'll get an hour, half an hour later, I get a dip. I don't know if everyone gets that from cupcakes or
most of us do from sugar, and it's that level of presence that's missing to the experience, so that then you can say, okay, well, do I like this? Is this something I want? Or is this something that maybe I don't want the energy drain after? Maybe I won't have as much of the cupcake next time. Yeah, more based on how I feel.
Maybe I'll just have a nibble of a cupcake, or I'll just smell the cupcake or look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you want it, just eat it until you've fully, feel satiated, right? Or sated.
Yeah. I think the other thing when I'm being really conscious is that if I'm upset and I'm going for a cupcake or ice cream or whatever my go-to comfort food is, mashed potatoes and gravy works pretty good for me, actually. But,
yeah.
Ice cream's not bad.
Yeah.
But if I can clear the emotion I have, whatever the upset is, and then have some water, because often when I'm hungry, it's not really hungry, it's really thirsty. Yeah. Then the desire for the cupcake goes away.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what you just brought up actually is really kind of the key in this, is that people kind of skip over that feeling the feelings, clearing the feelings part in this conversation. Well, most of us know it's not really about the food, but what we're not taught or given the tools around are how to work with the emotions. Emotional eating is a very natural thing. It's been given a very stigmatized perception, right? Based on, well, emotional eating leads to weight gain, and weight is bad, fat is bad. I say this with air quotes because that also can be a misperception, right? And the thing is, we were born emotional eaters, and it's actually vital to our survival. If we cried, our mothers knew it was time to feed us, and so food and comfort got intimately tied together from birth, and that's part of survival. And if we don't enjoy food, we wouldn't even eat it. So there's this catch-22 to enjoying food, because if you enjoy food, you're afraid you're going to overeat. Well, if you think that you're going to overeat, it's probably because there's a belief that you have to restrict in some way. So we are all emotional eaters. It's what we want to work with is, are we emotional undereaters or emotional overeaters? And not making that wrong, but understanding what is that as a symptom trying to point us to in our life. So if I'm emotionally overeating, what am I trying to numb? What am I not dealing with? What's missing? What do I need right now? What other self-care tools could show up in this moment to support me. Right.
Yeah. It's kind of tricky because there's a whole trillion-dollar industry of the food industry out there trying to convince you that you're just going to feel good if you eat whatever it is they're selling.
Right. And then there's a whole diet and fitness and wellness industry that's making you wrong for needing that.
Right. Yeah,
You know?
it's quite interesting, really.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot about your health and your eating psychology. Tell us how this led you to your infinite wisdom.
Well, so what I really realized in that, you know, in exploring all of this through eating psychology coaching is that when I wanted to, I had a bunch of unwanted behaviors, right, around food and my relationship to exercise and my body and all sorts of things. And what I really got in the process was that it's not really about calories. It's, you know, what's really having an impact on my body is stress. And I learned that to listen to my body and what was really going on, what she was trying to tell me, helped me start to think about changing my life and creating a lifestyle that's actually more supportive.
So what kind of messages was your body saying, just to help us understand?
Absolutely. So when I look at burnout, one of the things that I see in burnout is a need for external validation. So if we're burning ourselves out, we're buying into the idea of busyness and productivity is who we need to be being, busy and productive, in order to be worthy, right? I also see unhealed trauma in that. So if we have a propensity towards stress, if we are more sensitive, so burnout can also point to sensitivity. So there's a lot of different kind of doors you can go through based on the symptoms. So I started looking at all of these different things that my body might be telling me. Like the weight itself is a symptom of needing to be protected in some way, right?
Yeah, because literally people have to be kept at a distance. So one way to do that is to put on a lot of weight.
Right. And it can also be a response to stress. So if you look at different times in your life where weight has come on suddenly, perhaps, I always like to ask the question, well, what was happening in your life at that time, right? My first major weight gain happened when I was in high school. And my parents, I got in the middle of my parents' marriage. I was brought into the middle of my parents' marriage. I didn't voluntarily do it. And became, I was not an only child, but my brother had moved away when I was 9. So I was essentially an only child. And in the energy space. And there was a year where, somebody cheated, and everybody was mad at each other. And and I knew about it.
Okay.
And I spent a year, in this house with 2 people who were living in separate bedrooms, yelling at each other if they were talking to each other. And me trying to get through my high school years, and trying to just survive. So I avoided the house. I used to say you could cut the tension with a knife, which I didn't know I was empathic at the time. So I was probably right. I probably actually could have, if I had known how to work some spells. And the weight came on as a response to the stress, as well as just avoiding the house. Right. So that's when the loss of our core family, also we lost things like family dinners and quality home cooked food. And I ended up eating out more and going to East Side Mario's in Canada is like the Olive Garden of Canada, after school. And I go to Tim Hortons with my friends after school. And my boyfriend worked at McDonald's, and it was inside of the Walmart where I had my first high school job. So, you can kind of see how things would snowball from there. And I gained 30 pounds in a year.
Wow. But you were protected.
I was protected. That was my body's response to my soul and my heart kind of saying, I need protection. I need to feel safe. Right. And our bodies respond to these it's the mind body connection, right? So our bodies will respond to what we need without us really knowing what it's, without us even necessarily asking,
Right.
And because it's kind of a primitive system, it just says, I sense an enemy. My fight or flight was up. I was frozen. So it was really more my freeze response. I felt very stuck in that time. And so the cortisol would be firing and all sorts of things. And so, that's where I started to unpack all of this stuff over the years. Where did my weight come from? Where did my belly come from? Where did my immune system issues come from? So immunity, look at the connection is really in a sensitive soul whose body starts trying to put the defenses up. And I didn't know how to energetically protect myself as an empath. I wasn't aware that I wasn't aware that I was sensitive. So the more I work on healing or honoring my sensitivities, the more I can look at my immune system response, autoimmune disorders, digestive issues. Digestion can also relate to
you've just described half the illnesses that get treated in the Western world. Immune system disorders,
chronic pain, chronic fatigue, all of this stuff. It's an epidemic because we're pathologizing it instead of understanding what's really going on. I ended up with chronic pain and chronic fatigue as a result of not listening. And, my work now is about slowing down, creating space, learning how to listen to my body and honor its needs from a self-care perspective, and not trying to be, proving my worth by working 16-hour days in a job in an abusive workplace, So that's really the journey that I've gone on, which is really like, okay, what are these different things trying to tell me? And I take this in beyond just the physical response. I look at things like anxiety. I look at depression. Those are physical responses. They're just not ones that we really think of as physical. Right. And what are those trying to tell me? So it's really taking all of these challenges in our body and making them right for being there. And then listening to whatever soul message is underneath and underlying.
Now, I think this applies to a lot of entrepreneurs listening, because a lot of people have health challenges and they may not be hearing the message that they're getting. And they either do like you did and have eating to cover it up, or drinking or drugs, or working really long hours to cover up the pains in their body.
And taking, I know there's a lot of biohacking happening now in our world, which is awesome, but I also wonder if it's borrowed energy. There's also a lot of young entrepreneurs in their 20s who seem to have more energy. I mean, I'm 36 now, and I've started to run a little bit out of that stuff. I can't push myself anymore. My body says no. And I know that I have to listen, because I don't want to, this is the stuff that does lead to degenerative disease. My mom has fibromyalgia, chronic pain and chronic fatigue are right on the tails of that, so.
But you're not going to get that because you're listening to the messages from your body before it becomes that bad.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a wake-up call. When I saw the connection,
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I was reading a book recently. I'll see if I can remember the name, but it's by Joe Dispenza, who was in the What the Bleep movie.
Yeah.
And I've only just started reading it, but he had a story in there of someone who had terrible health challenges, but she started listening to the messages and basically healed herself. I mean, she had cancer of some kind, as well as some immune stuff, and Becoming Supernatural. That's the name of the book.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
I'll put that in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah. I've heard about that one.
Mm.
You know, and it can take time to listen. You know, I think it's very easy for people to get frustrated, and they're like, okay, I figured out my problem. Now I need to fix it. Right. Which is this very quick fix world that we're in. And when I had my health crisis in 2013, I went to a naturopath, you know, who gave me bottles and bottles of pills, and told me I had to quit sugar and wheat and eggs and like all my food sensitivities, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
But at the time, you know, I was still working full time in the film industry. I had a boyfriend who drank a lot and smoked a lot. I had a social group of people who I felt like I really belonged with for the first time in a long time in my life. And I called my father sobbing that I was going to have to, if I wanted to heal my body, I was going to have to give up my world.
Oh, wow.
You know,
because all the food that you ate together with those people was on the list of things you couldn't eat.
The food and the drugs and the drinking and the, you know, but it sounds like, you know, it should be, well, you know, you should just want to be able to take care of yourself, but it becomes this really, you know, the thing that really underlies our relationship with body image is a lack of self-love and a fear of not belonging. Because if we, you know, we've learned that to be accepted in our culture, we have to look a certain way. Like the prettier we are, the more perfect we are, the more accepted we are, right? And so belonging and self-love were like really, really under there for me.
Well, and there are some places like Los Angeles where that's very strong thing, that you have to have that the right body image. Yeah,
you know.
So why is body image?
My needs. I'll just to finish this thought. Sacrificing my needs for the sake of fitting in or not being judged or those kinds of things was something that was happening a lot as well. You know. Yeah. And that's something I see a lot with women.
Yeah. Well, you know, it ties into the control mechanisms used in the patriarchy to exactly keep women in their position.
Exactly. Yeah, to keep us small and also to keep us separated and divided. There's a lot of competition and comparison between women around how we look, so that we can get our man, right?
Yes, there's a scarcity of men, so it's actually 3.5 billion of them. So
well, and it does tie into scarcity a lot. I have that conversation a lot with my my money coach friends. The comparison between our relationship, food and body, is very tied into money, and it's just scarcity of energy in general. Time and money is the thing that stops us from doing most of what we want to do. And then self-belief, which comes from a lack of self-worth, right? So,
yeah. So why, you mentioned body image there. Why is body image and healing it such an important thing if you're going to tap into your intuition in your business?
Yeah. So the thing with our body image stuff is that, you know, what I like to say is that for us to feel really, truly free in our relationships with our bodies, we have to untangle the idea that health and worth have anything to do with looks and weight. You know, it's this perfectionism thing, right, that we're always striving for. And so we're listening outside of ourselves for the answers. We're turning to the experts and saying, you tell me how to make my body look perfect or work perfectly, instead of listening to ourselves and listening to our own messages. And when we can heal our, instead of fighting with our body, right? We use a lot of also like masculine terminology in the diet world, right? The battle of the bulge, being at war with our bodies, and measure all of the measuring and the calorie counting and the macros and like all of those things. It's a very masculine approach. And when we come back into just listening and trusting, we're coming back into more of the feminine as well. And when I look at it actually even as practice, when you can practice, how your body is responding to food, you can also start to hear its yeses and nos to other external, stimuli, right? So in relationships, in business, in, if you can listen to the yes and the no for food or movement, then we can listen to the yeses, the bigger yeses and the nos, the big soul yeses and the nos to guide our life and guide our businesses. And the reason that that's blocked is because when we are stuck in a negative body image, or we think that our bodies are supposed to be perfect, we're not listening to ourselves. We're up in our heads thinking about what we should be doing, what we're supposed to be doing, not what do I really want to be doing, what would really serve and honor my body right now. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to hear that message from the body when there's so much other social media and advertising and other people's thoughts in our own head.
Yeah.
So how do you help people hear their own body messages?
Practice. It's just practice. It's not going to happen overnight, but one of the problems is, we distrust it. We distrust our messages, or we deny them for the sake of, fitting in, or, not being alone, or having success. It's usually our ego actually loves to convince us that what we're really hearing is not true, and then there's the other element I want to also acknowledge, which is trauma. If we have dissociated from our bodies in some way to handle trauma, to handle stress, coming back into our bodies can also sometimes not feel like a safe place. I have a mentor and dear friend who helps women heal their relationship with their bodies and themselves after sexual abuse. And, in getting to know her and working with her, I had a lot of sexual shame, not from forced. Thank goodness I'm blessed to be not one of the 1 in 3. I'm in the other 2 of women, so far. Again, knock on wood, I carry pepper spray with me in big cities, but, which by the way, that level of stress at all times in our lives as women, we wonder why we're all having chronic pain, right?
Yeah.
So, what I learned was, I would hear a no intuitively, but I would dishonor it by not speaking up. Right. So, because I wanted my body, I didn't believe that somebody would love me for who I am, essentially. Right. So, I definitely had a number of sexual, relationships and encounters with men who didn't necessarily weren't full yeses for me. Right. I think a lot of us do. I think we all do that. Right. We get our needs met in one way that may not be true to ourselves, right? Whether it's sexual, whether it's in my job, right? I dishonored my no to that in that job for 10 years. And that's why I ended up burnt out.
Right.
Because my body was like, okay, when are you going to listen? When are you going to say no? When are you going to change your life? Because this isn't working for us. So ultimately, these symptoms in the body are pointing us to misalignment.
Yeah. And I've seen that in older entrepreneurs where they're doing something that's not making them happy.
Yeah.
and their health can suffer, or, you know, in the worst case, they get a heart attack or something like that. I mean,
Exactly. Oh, well, this was, you know, so this happened to me earlier this year. You know, and I think this is where the conversation in coaching, business coaching in particular, and money coaching around, you know, pushing through resistance can become problematic. Because what we want to really do is look at that resistance. Like, where is it really coming from? Where are you feeling it in your body? Is it constriction, or is this fear? Like, is it, you know, is it something that could be expansive if you said yes to it? Or maybe it's not even a yes. Maybe it doesn't flow, you know? And we're trying to convince ourselves that it's the right choice. But if we're really listening, you know, we might actually get a different answer. And sometimes we don't want that answer because it means we have to completely throw away a brand that's getting us lots of visibility, as in my case.
Yes.
You know? So, you know, I had a brand that I started last August called the Curvy Confidence Coach. And I'm curvy, I'm plus size. It was perfect marketing hook in my world. And, but it was, I felt, I mean, everything serves a purpose, right? So I feel like it gave me a really great inroad to understanding the world of body positivity and fat positivity, to understanding intersectional feminism, because that's all very tied in together. But I started to deny some of my more soulful, intuitive skills, and made it really much more about activism. And I became kind of a more of a blogger than I was a coach. It wasn't bringing in my ideal clients. But I was in podcast after podcast. I was published in magazines. I was running a workshop that I still love and I will still run, that helps women feel confident in bikinis on the beach. But I'll run it in a different way, you know? And it, you know, it was this little voice in the back of my head, right? For a long time, just saying like, this isn't fully who you are. This isn't, you know, putting the label of curvy on it. You're actually creating separation from women who aren't curvy, who still need this support and who could still benefit from you. Half of my clients weren't curvy. Curvy has been kind of co-opted by the plus world as well, I think. When I was a size 8 and size 10, I was curvy as well. But now curvy really does mean kind of size 12, size 14 and above. You know, and so it just, in so many ways, I had all of these.
Why do we even have to have a number on dress sizes? You know,
I know.
I mean, that's such a label.
Exactly.
And I don't know if it's my imagination. I feel there's been inflation in dress sizes in the last 20 years. You know, what used to be a 12 is not. You go to
their vanity sizing, for sure.
Yeah,
that's what they call it. Yeah.
Vanity sizing. Okay, I didn't know.
And why does there have to be a division, right? Like when I was 14 and 15, 16, and I gained that 30 pounds, right? I remember it was devastating to me that I had to go from the normal store to the fat girl store, basically.
Oh, you know? Right.
And in the mid 90s in Canada, we didn't exactly have the choice in fashion that we do today.
Right.
You know? So, and it's still lacking, you know, there's still, you know, 67% of women are size 12 and above in North America. And only 4% are represented in the media. You know, so yes, ultimately what I really love to help people do is move that conditioning and the labeling out of their way, you know, using our food and body wisdom as a doorway to being who they really are. So stripping ourselves of the labels, breaking out of the matrix, you know? And exactly. So the label, the curvy confidence coach, to me was even constricting, you know? And I kept thinking, but I'm throwing away, like I'm wasting an opportunity. It's such a good you know, it's a good way to get seen. It's great for visibility. You know, as a marketer, former marketer, I was like, it's such a good marketing hook, you know, but I knew. And so I kept hitting walls in my business. My energy got constricted. And in March, I had a car accident. This is, I think, when you first saw my post. I had a car accident in San Diego, right, coming out of my friend Rachel's retreat, which was about honoring my yes and listening to my no's, you know. And 3 blocks from her retreat, I T-boned a woman who ran a stop sign.
Wow.
And I was struggling financially because my business had not been growing, and I had invested a lot of money in a business coach. And that had started to feel quite out of alignment as well. And I was trying to charge high ticket pricing, which also felt out of alignment because I didn't feel an integrity, you know. And I was in a relationship that was like okay, but not great. And so all of these things were happening, and I was leaving this retreat thinking to myself, okay, you know your no's. Are you going to freaking honor them? Because if you don't, you know what's going to happen, you know? And I'm thinking about this, and 3 blocks from the house, I hit a car.
Wow.
And I had said to the universe / my mom about 2 weeks prior, I just need some financial
Are
breathing
they the same
room.
thing, the universe and your mom? Just
well,
so
I think
can
when you
get
say it
her
out
email
loud,
address and...
yeah, she would love to think that, I think. But, you know, I said I need some financial breathing room, and I hit this car, and it wasn't my fault because she had run a stop sign. And here comes a check, a $4,000 check for a car that was going to die anyway. And I thought, okay, well, I could either buy another car, or I could let this be my breathing room and actually take some space to figure out what's really going on.
Yes.
And
so you don't have any even bigger.
That's
don't
up
have
here,
any even
out. Listen.
Right.
You know.
Well, it's good that you took that space so you didn't have an even bigger message from the universe that could have been more disruptive.
Yes, exactly. So I joked that my spine went out of alignment so that I could get back into it.
So you could get back into
alignment.
Into alignment. Okay.
Yeah, personally.
And I think something you're saying there is you have to be a hell yes to something, which is a phrase some people use. It's a strong yes. If it's a maybe or a might, that's not a yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think you want to look at it. It's like, okay, well, does this feel like a wholehearted yes? And where do you feel it, right? Do you feel it in your heart? I do this a little bit. Actually, here's a tool I could offer. One of the things that I do to help people start feeling their yeses and their nos, you know, you think about something that is a hell yes. And where do you feel that in your body? What do you feel? And then think about something that's a no. And what do you feel? Where do you feel it in your body? You know, so I usually use I'll do a personal example, right? So, I mean, we could even do that with you right now. Like, what's a hell yes? What's a hell yes for you? What's something that's like a real hell yes for you, or a person, or a thing, or a food, or
a real
place.
Hell yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of a beach right now because you know. But.
Yeah. And where do you feel that in your body?
Upper chest. Feel open and it tingling around my upper chest.
Good. Yeah. So then think of something that's a hell no.
Oh, and I feel that on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Like, kind of contraction. Like I want to curl up into a little ball if I take it to the full extreme, but I feel weight on my back.
Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling into, I like to say feeling into rather than figuring out, because whenever I hear figuring out, I think you're thinking about it and you're filtering it through conditioning, right? Versus feeling into it, it's going to feel expansive. It's going to often feel heart opening. You know, women will feel it in our yonis oftentimes. Is it, or, you know, is it turning you on? Is it opening your heart? Is it expansive? Is it a positive tingle, or is it like a, oof, I want to crawl up? Is it a constricting? Does it feel weighty? Does it feel like
Mm-hmm.
My tummy's all in knots. Do I feel like I want to throw up? You know,
Mm.
when I've been using this example lately, a lot of my clients will just go right. It's like the hell no is Trump, you know? How does Trump make you feel? That's your
Mm.
no.
Mm.
So,
Or your yes, depending on which side of the spectrum you're on.
yes, it's true. Let's be politically balanced.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Yeah.
some percentage of people, whatever it was, 25% or 30% of the
Yeah.
population, voting population, voted for him. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
So,
I feel like some of them are regretting it. I hope so.
yeah, I'm sure some do, you know. I
I
mean,
know.
I think that's true of any election, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go down that
Sure.
tangent.
Sorry. I tend to be pretty political in my world, but I understand. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could talk for hours about it, but I think
know.
that wouldn't be on the topic of waking your body up to your
Absolutely.
infinite business wisdom.
Although, no, I know, but I have had the conversation about, you know, the kind of internalized misogyny that we have in our
Mm-hmm.
society, you know, and even as women, we have our own internalized misogyny and this is one of those things that makes us think that we have to look a certain way, to be appealing, to have sex appeal, to be worthy. You know, and so that is really one of those systems of conditioning that we want to dismantle in ourselves in order to love our bodies, in order to feel good in who we are as we are, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think really sex appeal comes from the joy and energy that you give out. I think Katharine Hepburn probably said something to that effect.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting the quote. I'll dig it up and stick it in the show
Yeah.
notes, but something to
Yeah.
the effect that if you're feeling happy and joyful, you radiate sexual beauty.
Yeah.
So,
And if you feel joy and happiness and alignment, you know, in who you are, you also are in an energy and in a vibration of attracting clients, right? And attracting and receiving abundance. That was one of those signs for me earlier this year, was like, okay, my energy is just shut down. Like, of course I'm not going to be attracting clients right now. So what's shutting it down? Why am I feeling anxious? Why am I feeling constricted? You know, I was having panic attacks waking me up at the middle of the night in December and January, like,
oh wow,
heart pounding out of my chest. And I was just like, okay, what is going on? You know? And I tend to find that for me, so one of the things that I do with people is I help them listen to those different wisdom symptoms, right? And create what I like to call like a body wisdom legend. So what does this mean usually for you? You know, like if you feel this way or you notice this, like what does it feel like for you? You know? So for me, anxiety has started to point to me feeling out of integrity. You know, and my old tendency is to be really hard on myself, you know, okay, what am I not doing that I'm supposed to be doing? And I'm really mad at myself that I'm not doing it. Instead of, okay, what's not in integrity with who I really am right now, with my higher self, with my higher purpose, with, you know, what's not in alignment with that. And if I let it go too long, then it tends to turn into depression.
Right. And it's surprising how many entrepreneurs actually are depressed or apathetic about their business. We often cover it up, but so let's talk about how people may be covering up their body intuition. Maybe they're numbing it out or avoiding it, or maybe they're just afraid of all the feelings that might come up if they started listening to it.
Yeah, I see it often. So with entrepreneurs particularly, I see a lot of spiritual bypassing, you know, just faking it till you make it, focusing on the positive instead of honoring the shadow, working and pushing instead of being with, you know, resistance and holding space for it, eating instead of looking at the resistance, sometimes over like work, you know, over exercising can be something that that comes into play.
Competitive exercising might be
mm-hmm.
That's what I've sometimes noticed people do. Instead
Yeah.
of like, what does my body want? It's like, I've got to get whatever this distance or time or weight lifted or whatever it is.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of looking at like, where are you? Can you be alone, right? Or watching TV can be something too, right?
Yeah, media, not just TV, but the whole media, like
Facebook. Yeah.
I mean, I made a video about, I'm doing a 90-day video challenge right now, and I just did this video. I was in a street corner, and everywhere you look, there was a video screen. And then everyone has their phone too. Like if heaven forbid you should be away from a video screen. Yeah. You've got your portable video screen just in case you might be bored for 5 seconds. You can whip it out.
Yeah. 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 And then like, what does that mean? You know, I've noticed I had a client who was like, so mad at herself because she couldn't stop looking at her phone in the car. And, you know, we started exploring it and kind of going into the root of it. And it was ultimately around connection, like not feeling connected, feeling lonely, you know, and Facebook gives us such a false sense of connectedness, right? We're not actually receiving, we're getting dopamine hits from the likes, but we're not really receiving real connection.
Right. You know? Yeah. Facebook doesn't look you in the eye. It doesn't give you a hug, you know, at least not yet.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so sometimes it's just, did you stay in your pajamas all day and get any work done? You know, if you feel like you didn't, and you feel like constantly overwhelmed by like not doing and needing to do, you know, to me, that's something is asking you to actually take a break and slow down so that you can, you know, like slow down to speed up. In that sense, I see a lot of people who are burnt out and still feeling the pressure of pushing through. Now, I also want to acknowledge, like some of us, you know, there's privilege in being able to take a break. There's especially, you know, the way the kind of economy is going in the States, it can be tough, but it seems daunting to even take a break. Sometimes I had this conversation with a friend last night. She was just like, I'm exhausted, but I can't stop. And I was like, you have to stop or your body's going to keep stopping you. And her body has stopped her like beyond the point where she should be functioning right now, you know, chronic pain, massive digestive issues, all sorts of autoimmune stuff, you know? And I was just like, just take 48 hours to give yourself full permission, you know, to take a fucking break. Quit the screens.
Right.
If you feel like you're lonely, call a friend. Like, just don't be scrolling for hours. And the blue light is, you know, keeping you up and not preventing you from resting. And 48 hours of full permission to have unstructured time to do whatever you want, as long as it doesn't involve technology. Go into nature. Bring a friend if you have to. Like, go camping. Like, you don't have to do this by yourself, but just get connected, you know?
Yeah.
But if you're going to be with somebody and it's going to give you a sense of obligation, then don't be with somebody, you know?
Digital detox, I think, is the phrase some people use for having a day where they just don't touch their phone or computer.
Yeah.
Stay away from electronics.
Yeah. So what are some of the symptoms that we might see are lack of focus, getting sick a lot, difficulty sleeping. We think that lack of focus is a lack of motivation, but usually it's a very subtle symptom of burnout and trauma.
That's a great clue to get from our bodies. If we're feeling lack of focus, it's time to take a break before we burn out.
Yeah. And ask yourself, is this something I really want to be doing? Like, is this fun? Is this giving me joy? You know, if I like to also think about, just being guided by like a very simple question in all areas, whether it's food, whether it's what we want to do with our lives, whether it's a relationship. Does this give me energy or does it take it away?
I love that. Let's say that again.
Does this give me energy or does it take it away? Does being with this person give me energy? Does it give me joy? Is it fun? Or am I constantly trying to like, you know, protect my boundaries because of their toxicity, you know? Does this task give me joy? Is this in my zone of genius? Is this fun? If it's, you know, this is where we look at resistance being, you know, pointing you to something that might be truer for you. Maybe you don't really want to do this. Like, frankly, I don't love the marketing elements of this job, right? But I'll get on podcasts all day. I'll talk to people. I'll coach. I really want to have a team as soon as I can, so that so that they can help me. You know.
Well, what would it take for you to have a team now?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, it would be having the financial bandwidth. Yeah.
Well, then what would it take to have the financial bandwidth that requires? You know, we won't dig down into that, but what would it take is a very powerful
question.
I think energy is very important, and joy in a business. I wrote a whole section in my book on that, and energy vampires, and just doing an energy audit. You know, like you said, like the question you're using, what does this give me energy or take it away? You know, with every person involved in your business, every client, every staff member, every vendor, and then every area of your business, you know, do an energy audit of all the areas of business. And if marketing doesn't give you joy, can you delegate it? Can you eliminate it? Can you do it some other way?
Right.
Or what would it take for the marketing to give me joy if I'm choosing to do it right now? For various reasons. How could I make it joyful? How could I have fun doing it?
Right. Well, and that's a really good point. It's like, can I do it some other way is what I've really been looking at too, is, you know, what are the things that I like creating? What gets me, you know, out of bed in the morning, to do that, you know? So is it, you know, am I trying to do, so the other question to ask in that is, am I trying to do things the way that other people do it and it's working for them? If not, do I need to create a new way that's going to feel more in flow for me? That's actually leads really well into the next question.
What's the next question, Natalie?
This was around why should we flow instead of fighting our monthly cycles?
Yes, so many women do that.
Yeah.
So tell us what fighting your monthly cycle would look like.
So that looks like yesterday was the first day of my period. And I had all sorts of ideas about what I was supposed to accomplish yesterday. I was tanked. Right. Also, when we are, so this I learned from a very dear friend of mine, Stasha Washburn, who's who I helped name the period coach. And she helps women sync their businesses with their cycles. And when we are in our menstrual phase, we're much more intuitive. Ironically, usually not as verbal as I am today. And what we did in the corporate world, and we do in the kind of patriarchal structure of working, is that we feel like we should be exactly on a certain way every week of the month, right? But that's just not true for us. And for men too, if you follow the moon, if you're more intuitive, if you're more sensitive, you may feel the energy flow, flows of the world, of our natural world, right? So flowing with the cycle is about planning your month around your peaks and your valleys and where your strengths are going to be that week. So for me right now, I've given myself permission to not have to do, but I'm allowing, whatever wants to come through and the space to come through, because the veils are thinner for me right now. And I'm sensitive. So I'm not going to go out in a crowd of a bunch of people. I've noticed, especially the more I've tuned into my body, the more I realize that this week I'm delicate. you know,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm very open.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really good week for me to be tuning into what's a yes and what's a no,
Mm.
because I can feel the energies of those things more. Me getting worn down tends to be when I've pushed against my cycle, or I've
Mm.
extroverted a little too much and I haven't listened to my need for sleep, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of run through it really quickly, the follicular phase, which is right after menstrual, your energy is starting to build back up again. So it's a really good time to ramp up into the doing of the things that you've been tuning into, what's in alignment around. Ovulatory is very verbal. It's a great time to book podcast interviews, or uh, put sales calls in that week, or teach a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of energy, and also we're just more magnetic even those weeks, you know.
Mm.
And then you come back into luteal phase and you're starting to kind of cool off and kind of slow down and get back
Mm.
into self-care. And luteal phase is a really good phase for planning.
Mm.
So that's kind of the cycle of the month. And when you can get that into the flow and flow with it instead of fighting against those things, it's just going to feel better. You know, I think a lot of people have PMS because they're fighting the intuitive desire to rest, to listen, to create, to be in a red tent somewhere, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and just be like, I mean, we're cleansing and we're, you know, we're shedding. So what else do we want to shed? What feels, you know, what do we want to maintain? So that's it.
Yeah, and that applies not just to period, but also the lunar cycle,
Yeah,
which
I think
all
so too.
humans respond to.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
why the word lunatic is lunatic, right? Because
Yeah.
that's because people get a bit crazy at that
Yeah.
time of the
Yeah.
month.
You know, I for a long time my period ran on the full moon. And I
Mm.
thought that it was my period that was making me really anxious, because I get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
anxiety around the full moon.
Mm.
If I'm not allowing that energy to move.
Mm-hmm.
So my period moved off of it onto the new moon at one point, because that can happen. And I found myself still anxious around the full moon. And I had started to, like, you know, get into our world of, you know, witchy woo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, oh, maybe this is just creative energy that wants to come through. And maybe what I really want to be doing is my inner wild woman just wants to be dancing out naked under the full moon in the desert, you know?
Mm.
But here I am in my house in LA trying to get sleep. So, because I have to work tomorrow.
Mm.
Right. So when there's also you know, an element of flowing with the energy when it is coming through, and not stifling it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of things about messages from your body and listening and avoiding numbing it out. How can we apply this to our businesses today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's going back and looking at, is there resistance to something? Is there a task that you've had on your to-do list for weeks, and you're like, oh, I just don't want to do this. Maybe you just don't want to do it. You know?
Yes, maybe you could just say no, or or hire someone else to do it.
Or hire someone else to do it. Or is there another way to do it? Get creative.
Right.
Is it something you really have to do? You know?
Yeah. What would it take to get the result I want in another way?
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to those feelings, tuning into what's your yes, what's your no. Is it what feels expansive, what feels constricting? So if you're trying to decide on something you want to create on a course, you know, or you've had, you know, where a lot of us are big idea generators, and not necessarily putting those things into action, maybe it's because they're just not in the right phase right now. So every day, just waking up and asking yourself, like, what would be a joy to work on today? What would give me joy? What would give me energy?
I'm writing that one down.
Yeah. You know, I'm traveling right now because I decided that for me to, you know, feed my hungry soul, I needed to get out of LA and start traveling the world, because that's something that didn't have permission to do in the film industry, right? I was shamed for wanting to take vacations, and one of the reasons I became a coach in the first place was because I wanted to have location independence. And as we know, that's been a little bit trying when it comes to having consistent Wi-Fi, but the energy of me getting more integrity into integrity with myself and what my desires are bringing, making my voice more authentic, and who I'm showing up as in the world is more authentic. So that's the other thing, is I would say, like, how can you be more authentically you in the world as well, by listening to what's true for you, what's in alignment for you, what would feed your soul, what would give you energy, what would give you joy. So I've been joking that, like, my whole life right now, I'm like Marie Kondoing all of my energy. Only what gives me joy.
That is wonderful. So share with us why you're proud to use your business intuition openly.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I was taught for a long time to spin in the film industry, spin who you really are, compartmentalize. It took me about 3 years of coaching and still consulting in the industry before I came out as a coach, before I came out as woo, right? I didn't even come out really as woo until even just talking about intuition, I think there's a fear of turning people off and not fitting in and not belonging, right? Because you want, I definitely have had a tendency to want everybody to like me, right? And be a bit of a pleaser in that sense. But the more I am authentically me and sharing who I am, the more I will find my ideal clients, the more they'll be attracted to me, and I know that that's true. I've seen the evidence of it, right? So, for me, I think it's just a beautiful example of another way to look at resistance is my story. I had a lot of judgment. I'd been coached, to think that I was playing small, or that I was self-sabotaging. And I kept feeling this pressure to rush, have my back up against the wall financially so that I would get into action, all of those kind of more masculine approaches to business. And, have I been in, earning, and have I had like business success this year? No, I've actually probably made the least amount of money in my entire life this year. But am I more in flow? Am I more true to who I am? Yes. And I know that what I'm creating out of this, since that car accident, since I actually finally slowed down to really listen to my intuition, what I'm creating now is much more in alignment with who I really am. And so, yeah, I could push to get something out there that isn't really true to me, but I'm not going to feel good about doing it. And I just know that. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as entrepreneurs to have fast success, earn all of the money quickly, right? And not unlike a midlife crisis, there's one moment where we wake up and go, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good to me, and there's a perspective of that could be fear of failure. That could be this, that could be that. For me, it's really more, my whole life has been about getting, in the last 4 years, back into a feminine flow and moving out of those masculine strategies of motivation, fear, stress, scarcity, not that scarcity and lack, the masculine strategies of forcing and pushing, right? Versus, I'm not saying that, I don't think fear and scarcity come from the masculine. I think it's a shadow of all of us, but, moving out of that doing energy and more into a being energy, and letting my business develop out of that instead, because it's actually vital to my health for me to do that. If I don't do that, I will not be okay. It's just true. My body does not let me get away with pushing anymore. So, what's the best way to guide myself now in my business is to really listen. I know that.
So, I'm on a mission to help all entrepreneurs to openly use their business intuition, because I think it will make them more money and bring them more joy. And also I think if all business leaders did use their intuition, they'd make less dumbass decisions that hurt other people or hurt the planet.
That's true too. That's true too. Yeah.
So what would it take to make business intuition used openly everywhere this year?
My first thought, right thought, is just talking about how you use intuition in your life, talking about how you are, as a business owner, making your decisions, and what guides you to work with certain people, or what guides you to what's the to listen to an idea and work from that. Is it coming from, is it coming from thinking what you should be doing or what might be marketable, or is it coming from an intuition of like, no, this is really important and this is what I want to share, and I don't have to explain why, it just is, right? That's just what I feel. It's just what I know. I think the more of us that talk about it and make it right, instead of make it woo, right, will give us all permission to do it more.
That sounds a great thing for all of us to do. So if people want to find you online, how would they best do that?
Yeah. So my website is nataliebaack.com. That's Baack, like the composer, but with an extra A and a K instead of an H. And on Facebook, I'm at The Permission Circle, which is the next phase of my business that I'm in the process of launching right now. And it's really about coming from that space of giving yourself permission to be and do whatever feels true for you in that moment, and so that you can come more into alignment with your true self and who you're here to be. And then on Instagram, it's Natalie Ariane Baack, which is my middle name, Arianne, because there's another Natalie Baack who lives in Australia.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes so it's easy for people to find you.
Perfect.
I appreciate you coming on the show and overcoming all the resistances that came up for us to get together.
It's always in perfect timing.
Yes.
I needed a bit more space without Wi-Fi to let these clarities come through. So,
yay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.